We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's special show, we'll be talking debate prep for presidential candidates, the fallacy of national polling, Trump's legal travails, and a whole lot more. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio. We're very lucky to have with us Liberty Nation's senior political analyst and longtime host of this here radio show, Mr. Tim Donner, who joins us to discuss the upcoming Kamala Harris, Donald Trump presidential debate. Thanks for being here, Tim.
Always a pleasure, Mark, of course.
So, Tim, I'm so looking forward to this debate. And 2 points I want to kind of put out there and then get your feedback on. It is, number one, the last person to debate Donald Trump ended up quitting his campaign. How do you think that's going to impact Kamala Harris's mindset going into the fight?
Not much, because the result of the first debate had almost nothing to do with Donald Trump, except for the fact that he did show a level of discipline in the debate that he had never shown before, but a lot of that was because his mic was muted. And it's certainly interesting that now, when Trump wanted the microphone live against Biden, Biden insisted on it being muted. Now, Trump wants it to be muted, and Harris wants it to be live. So, when they're not talking, so who really knows? But, the big interview with Kamala Harris, where she looked like she was at a closed coffee shop late in the evening, and she looked like she was about half the size of Tim Walz, and it looked like they hadn't cleaned up a bunch of dirty dishes that had been left behind. I don't know who thought of that tableau for Kamala Harris's first interview out of the box. But let's remember that as evasive as she was during that interview, that was 16 minutes, 16-minute interview, at least the parts that we saw. This is 90 minutes. And Kamala Harris won't have Tim Walz there to hold her hand. He won't be the dad at the job interview like he was with Dana Bash, who I thought did a...
Like Linus's security blanket.
Security
Charlie
blanket,
Brown, as
yes.
he wrote in your...
Yes, she won't have that, but I think that we can see clearly that Kamala Harris's strategy is to deflect, to basically confuse people with changes of policy and word salads so that she can't really be pinned down. There's no reason to think this will be any different. So I think in the end, what really matters here more than anything, strangely enough, is how Trump reacts in this debate, because he was, by all accounts, quite flummoxed that Joe Biden was no longer in the race, and then suddenly Kamala Harris is anointed to the top of the ticket, and she gets all this great publicity and the joy of the convention and all this stuff. So he, frankly, hasn't been, I think, entirely sure exactly how to go after Harris. And part of the problem, Mark, I think, is that there's so many possible lines of attack that you can't do all of them. So you have to decide where you think she is most vulnerable to the greatest number of voters. But I mean, it's such a target-rich environment. It will be curious to see what Trump emphasizes. Does he emphasize the economy? Does he emphasize crime, immigration, inflation? He will discuss all of those things, plus the foreign wars. But where does he think she's most vulnerable? I think, on the other hand, not to go on too long here, as I go on too long, I think it's pretty clear that Kamala Harris will try to do the same thing that Biden wanted to do but couldn't, which is to get under Trump's skin, to get into his head, to force him into bombast that makes him look like the bad Donald Trump instead of the good Donald Trump and the economy and all those kind of issues.
But it's interesting that she'd try that strategy. I can see why that could be appealing, because this whole debate is going to be cut down into miniature sound bites that will play out across social media.
Yes.
That's where people will get the cut and thrust of the whole thing, because not that many people in the grand scheme of things will watch it from start to finish and make their own evaluations on it. Most people will, if they do watch the debates at all, be watching it on a network that will cut away and give like the little spin on things, or fact checking Donald Trump over everything. He'll say, I made a beautiful wall. And they'll say, the wall that he made was not in fact beautiful. We rate that as it was an ugly wall.
Yes, yes.
So
when fact checkers start fact checking jokes,
I know,
we're in trouble.
Well,
and they're doing it.
Of course. I mean, it's since Donald Trump did that town hall where he said, I'd be a dictator on day one just to do this. It was clearly a joke. And yet this has become the lodestone, the guiding light, which the supposedly wise men of the media are marching towards. Saying, well, he said he'd be a dictator. He said it. When people tell you who they are, believe them, because apparently making a gag is not acceptable for Donald Trump. But let's talk about Kamala Harris a little bit. Yes, I think she will try, as you say, to bring out the bombast in Donald Trump, which, to be fair, a lot of people actually enjoyed in 2016, especially his riposte to Hillary Clinton. Well, that's because you'd be in jail.
Yes.
I mean, that's still making the rounds on the internet now. It was an iconic moment. But there's this pervasive idea that because of her career as a prosecutor, that she's hard-nosed, she's tough, she can handle the cut and thrust of debate. And in fact, the BBC website had this, it was like a 1,500-word essay on how incredible Kamala Harris is at debates. And there are 3 points that they made this argument with, was that she won a debate to become Attorney General of California against a Republican, which is clearly, there was no way that she was not going to win that. That she became senator after debating a Republican. Again, California, the Republican wasn't going to win.
It's what you call a one-party state.
Yeah. And then the third part, which they really glossed over, they said she actually had more speaking time than any other candidate during the 2020 election primaries, other than Joe Biden. But what they didn't mention is that after that debate, she was forced to close up shop and shut down her campaign without receiving a single delegate. Mm-hmm. And of course, receiving, as I believe, and I think I've still got this number correct, a mere 824 votes in the Democratic primary from the entire nation. And so this idea that she's a tough, hard battling prosecutor who can think on her feet, I don't buy it.
Well, we'll get a chance to see whether the country buys it. You can dodge and you can be clever up to a certain point. You can use word salads that sort of convey basic principles that everybody likes, like I support freedom. Okay. Well, the people that are anti-freedom are not exactly holding demonstrations saying we don't want freedom. See, she's using, comforting bromides is the way that I would put it. And she's going to try to make Donald Trump look mean and cruel and basically not having the character necessary to become president of the United States. Of course, the problem is that he was already president. So people can see what he would or wouldn't do. I think it's notable, Mark, to look at the lines of attack that the left has used. And it's not hard because they send out their talking points and then all of a sudden, every Democrat strategist and office holder goes on TV and uses the same talking point. Case in point, Exhibit A is the word weird. Okay, Tim Walz actually elevated his profile by describing Trump and Vance as weird. Okay, suddenly, the next day on TV, there was about 10 different commentators that used the word weird. So my point is that they get their marching orders and they walk in lockstep based on the most recent talking points. And you might note that they've stopped really talking about saving democracy. They've stopped talking about January 6th. Now they're talking about Project 2025, which is not even a Trump policy. So it shows that the lines of attack on Trump are really limited to a general character attack, to that issue, and to abortion. And so you can expect that's what Kamala Harris will do, and she will act, I guarantee you, as she did with Mike Pence. 5 times she said, "Excuse me, I'm speaking, don't interrupt me." She's going to have that indignant attitude towards Trump, I guarantee you, where she's going to try to show that she's tough by telling him to shut up. I expect that to happen.
Yeah, it's almost as though she doesn't understand that it's a debate. Yeah,
right, where both people are actually supposed to talk. I don't know what's going to happen with the mic issue, but it'll be fascinating right down to the last minute before the debate starts.
We'll be covering that on the pages of libertynation.com. We'll be back with Tim Donner after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.